Professor Wang from the University of San Diego gave a presentation at Stanford, and it's really interesting because this is about teleoperating robots for the purpose of learning. This is also about using vision language action models to have them, move around. So I think the two really interesting concepts that are, in my opinion, two pathways towards better robotics learning, and Professor Wang seems to be at the forefront. I haven't heard about him, but he did his postdoc with Jitendra Malik, and he's actually on one of the dexterity papers that I've discussed before. So he's been around, and he's now at UC San Diego, and he is in the really in the business of using specific models such as vision language models and teleoperation to enhance robotic learning. So he's using the vision language action model for, let's say, high-level navigation and locomotion and some manipulation, and then the teleoperation is for fine dexterity manipulation. I think this is really important. If we step back for a second, we dissect the robotics problem into its components. Okay, we have locomotion, so the thing has to actually be able to move. That's call it a mechanics problem. Then we have navigation. That's a mechanics AI problem, and then manipulation, mechanics AI problem. And what Wang is doing here, he's using what's available right now in terms of state-of-the-art technology to solve these problems. And he's saying, look, we can use vision, and he actually comes from vision, so I think that's interesting also. We can use vision to give the robot a sense for where it is and where it's supposed to go. However, vision doesn't seem to do very well when it comes to fine dexterity, and that's where they want to attack this problem. They want to attack with teleoperation. So I think that's really what this presentation is about, and I think it's important because it reminds us of the CyberCap unveil day when we went to LA, and Tesla was having these robots walk around, teleoperated robots walk around, obviously, and one of the purposes was, of course, to show them off, but also to learn, because that's how you actually collect data that can be used for learning. This is not in our own podcast. It's November 24, 2024. This is Crim Telco. Since the last update, we're up 4.6%. The market is up 50 basis points. For the year, we are up 69.3%. The market is up 24.6%. We're outperforming by 44.7%. So Professor Wang's presentation really caught my attention because it reminds me of the Tesla Robot Day, and here's why. So they're using teleoperation for learning, and that's, I think, one of the purposes of Tesla's Robot Day. So when we talk about teleoperation, let's start with teleoperation and then talk about the sort of two-tiered approach: vision language action models for high-level navigation and manipulation, and then teleoperation for more dexterity manipulation. So let's talk about what this, what's the concept of teleoperation. So teleoperation, the idea of teleoperation is that we have a person that is acting, and the limbs and fingers and cameras of the robot. So think of a humanoid robot with a head, with arms, with fingers, things like that. So these, they're somehow connected to the human. So whatever the human does, the robot does. That's the idea of teleoperation. Now, the technicality of how this is done is explained in one of the papers. So the links are all in the show notes. The presentation that he gave, the presentation is not in the show notes, but the papers are in the show notes. So think about it this way. Like you have, let's say you have a VR headset. The VR headset, the human thinks that it's holding a bottle, but the human's actually not holding the bottle. The bottle is held by the robot, but the human on the VR headset has the impression that she is holding that bottle, and she's moving the bottle up and pouring some water in a cup. All of these things are happening in virtual reality as far as the human is concerned. But what's important is that the VR headset is connected to the robot, which is actually doing those things. And this is the key. So this is the, in my opinion, quite a breakthrough, because now we have teleoperation from the ego perspective. And this is really important. I've seen other teleoperation exercises at Stanford in particular, where you have to teleoperate, but not from the ego perspective, from the third person perspective. And that's really difficult to do, right? For a person, you think about it, like you have to pour a glass, but you are standing next to a robot, but you have to think like you are the robot. It just requires a lot of transfer thinking. And of course, it's like video games and things like that. You can get better at it. But let's assume that this VR headset type approach is a better approach. So having said that, now we have this ability to have robots walk around like we saw at the Tesla day, shake people's hands, give high fives, pour glass. We had this one French-speaking robot that was giving people beer, I think, or handing out stuff, I forgot. So there was, one robot was a bartender, things like that. So you could imagine in the future an army of robots going around supermarkets, shopping malls, whatever, places like that, shaking hands with people, talking to people, high-fiving, doing all kinds of things. And that, according to Professor Wang, is really good for high dexterity type manipulation. Now, why do we need this? Why can't we just use, let's say, video language action models for that? Well, the problem is because the cameras and vision is not precise enough when it comes to very fine dexterity movements. In other words, even us humans, when we do, let's say, imagine you're handling a pen with your fingers. You're moving a pen around with your fingers, or a drummer moves the drumstick around with his fingers and things like that. Like, you need more than just vision for that, right? You have, in our case, we use touch, we use proprioception, so we have a feeling for forces and weights, and a lot of senses are getting kicked in when we go fine dexterity. Think about it the other way around. Like, imagine you're watching somebody draw something, and you watch that person draw, and then just from watching that person, you also are able to draw like them. I doubt it. Like, you need much more fine dexterity. In other words, if you could teleoperate yourself with this person that draws, you would learn much faster how to draw. Let's say jiu-jitsu. You watch people do jiu-jitsu. Of course, just watching people do jiu-jitsu is not going to get you anywhere. You have to actually exercise. So this goes back to this, I think, fundamental learning that we all humans have, is that when it comes to fine dexterity stuff, we actually have to do it. And this is what this teleoperation approach is trying to achieve. In our opinion, this is really interesting, and also shows that when things are like that are done in the labs, then potentially they're also done at Tesla. And we've seen this actually at the CyberCap Day. So this is, in some way or form, it is definitely a revelation. Now let's talk about the vision language action model, which is sort of the high-level navigation manipulation solution to the robotics problem. So that is, think about it this way, like, what is a vision language action model? A vision language action model is a model that takes in an image, turns it into a language, gives the robot semantic understanding, and then promotes an action. So for example, you have the robot is tasked to go pick up pillows that lie on the floor. Let's say, a home robot. So the robot walks into the home and has the vision, looks around, and then sees a pillow on the floor, and then gets triggered an action, go and pick up the pillow. So all of these things can be done with vision language action models. So when the robot gets to the pillow, that's where it potentially might need more dexterity to actually pick up the pillow and put it somewhere. Maybe the pillow it can actually even do with just vision language action. But when we're talking about, let's say, pick up this pen and put it in a very specific drawer or a specific location, that's when it it might need more dexterity, and that's where the teleoperation comes from. So to summarize this approach by Professor Wang, and again, the papers are in the show notes. There's also one paper which he didn't present, but I think is really interesting, and that's the dexterity paper that he co-wrote with Professor Malik and a couple of other people. What's interesting in that paper, it's fine dexterity with teleoperation and simulation. So this is really interesting. And that's something, of course, Jitendra Malik is talking about a lot. And what is that? So it's dexterity in terms of moving a pen around fingers. And what they're doing there is they're starting with teleoperation to collect a bunch of data about how that works. And they're putting it in simulation, and then they're running many, millions of iterations in simulation, collecting data and developing a reinforcement-based policy, and then put it back in real. So this back and forth between teleoperated real, sim, and then back to real, I think this is, it reminds me of the drone example that I've discussed many times, the drone race. So I think this iteration between simulation and real and teleoperation, which is, if you will, like a hybrid, it's kind of a virtual real type hybrid. I think those are very interesting aspects of robotics, and I think we're going to have to, or we're going to be, lucky to have more of these types of examples being promoted potentially at NeurIPS this year. There's also workshops at Coral that we haven't actually even looked at. They're on YouTube, so we're gonna go through those. Again, I think the fundamental problem here is, the big picture is, of course, humanoid robots / Optimus for Tesla, and then the fine-grained problem is, the three big problems of robotics, which is locomotion, navigation, and manipulation. Okay, the thing has to move, it has to know where to go, and it has to be able to do all kinds of very fine dexterity type problems. So this is fundamental, and I think we have basically these three big solutions that can help us. One is simulation, one is video language action models, and one is teleoperation. So we have this really nice sort of hybrid situation with teleoperation, which is kind of virtual and kind of real, right? You are teleoperating in virtual space using a VR headset, but the robot is actually doing real things. Then you have the vision and language action model, which is in fully virtual space, moving images into semantic understanding, and having the robot actually do things, navigate around the place. And then we have simulation, which helps us sort of bootstrap the robot, give the robot a first basic policy to manipulate something really difficult that it can't do based on cameras alone, and then move it back to real and go back and forth. This idea of sim to real, real to sim, sim to real, I think it has legs, because we don't have to just do one shot policy in sim and then go real and then hope it works. We can go kind of back and forth. So I think those are sort of the pathways that Professor Wang is showing. I think really an interesting presentation, also an interesting sort of direction of robotics that we're definitely going to keep an eye on. Thanks.